would you like to present the agenda?
No changes to the agenda or the additions from council?
So could I have a motion to move the agenda as presented?
Kingston?
The conseiller Richard and conseiller Kingston.
Yes.
Non, je peux pas voir.
Richard and Kingston.
Est-ce qu'il faut dire le faveur? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. Perfect. Merci. So the first item.
There are no minutes. A declaration of conflict of interest et déclaration des conflits d'intérêts. See, okay, so new business. The first up today is Peter McKee Community Food Center request for funding. I believe Vincent Marola is on his way down, but Jeff Preston can start.
Yep, thanks, Shelley. So I believe that the mayor received a letter from Peter McKee on January 24th and requesting $28,000, and that $28,000 is half of the $56,000 they're allocating that they've had to increase their security costs. I think they have 24/7 on-site security. I believe Vincent can correct me when he's down here. The province in the CRF, it says that it kind of insinuates the province has not given their portion of the funds. Vincent has confirmed, he's on his way in here now, has confirmed that they have, I think about a month ago. So, you know, they could wait to the, you know, we discuss possibly, come on up, Mr. Richard.
Okay.
Waiting until this year's grant process. However, those funds are kind of needed now because it's impacting their ability to provide some of the services that they are.
That's correct. Yeah.
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 And anything else, Vince, as far as you've been talking to them?
Yeah, this would certainly be a big help for the organization. I understand it's sort of, we don't want to set a precedent where we're just handing out money like this at the request, especially given that this is a provincial kind of mandate that they're supposed to be keeping the area secure. But I don't think it's fair, but personally, and from administration as well, that this agency is unnecessarily having to pick up these costs. And the concern about volunteers is a big thing too. We don't want them to lose the very small pool of volunteers that we have today. So that's why we're in support of this. Provinces already did their portion. I don't know if you already covered that or not.
Yeah.
So we would be on the hook for the remainder.
Merci, Vincent. We have a motion, so could I have a mover and a seconder for the motion, and then we'll go to the discussion or questions. Qui veut proposer la motion?
Who would like to move this request?
Kingston, yes, thank you.
Okay. Donc, question,
Any questions?
commentaire?
Councilor Crossman.
Conseiller Crossman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ontario. My question is, when are we as a council going to have a sit down and discuss the future of the old, of this building that is across the street, the city-owned building, the old MLCC? I just find that at this point, if the CRF is very well detailed by city staff, it's very straightforward. It shows that there's something going on at the shelter that is affecting seniors in the area, affecting volunteers in the area, and affecting the Peter McKee Center. So, and I know that we have an agreement with the province of New Brunswick for said building on St. George Street, but I think we've got to figure out when we're going to have these conversations on a council level, because the security in the area is obviously a concern. That the Peter McKee has to come forward to council outside of the budget to update security for the for those people using the services within that building. So my concern is the old building that the city of Moncton owns, obviously the MLCC building. I think we've got to have a conversation on this, and council has to be very direct and has to be very understanding what's going on in the community, and we cannot continue to let this happen where we're spending taxpayers' money on additional security when we own the building that the Moncton Lions seniors were in before, and we were not having these issues before. So I'm not sure who can answer my question. Jeff, I do appreciate you being in the room, and Vincent, I know I can't see you, but I know that you're in the room. So I would like some sort of feedback and some sort of direction and time frame from city staff.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. So we have started an internal working group. It's very preliminary at this time, but we are exploring potential St. George. I don't want to call it revitalization, but we do know that we have an RFP going out, if it's not already gone out, to do that, just sort of like a street sort of revitalization. But we want to tie together with various departments exactly what you're alluding to there regarding having serious conversations about the go forward. So we're looking at potentially some of the property in and around the former Moncton Lions Community Center to see how we might be able to best utilize that around there. A lot of those spaces are not, it's not city owned, although we do own that big fenced-in area out back. And one of the things that we are sort of exploring with that fenced-in area is getting the province to utilize it much better. They're not using it at all right now, which is not good, because when people don't have a place to go, they're going to congregate in parks and what have you, and that's where we start to see some issues. So we are actively, we just had a meeting this morning with Joanne, with the province, and we're talking with the operator there about starting with a pilot project specifically to the community center there, where they'll use the back fenced-in area for folks. So we can now start to send folks that have no place else to go. As you know, our status quo is moving folks along as soon as it's notified to us, but most of the time they have no place to go. So we're making the case to the province that, like, we need to have the resources for the back of the Moncton Lions Community Center so people can go there. That the resources include further to what council's already approved for the $150,000 for us to be able to upgrade it as part of CEPTED. But the province needs to come to the table with providing human resources for either Reconnect to be able to manage it, or even John Howard Society. But that's part of a very first stage of a much larger project where we're looking at revitalization and how we can best serve the homeless population, where it would have as little impact as possible on the residents along St. George. So very good point, Councillor Crossman, and we are having those conversations, and we'll certainly keep you up to date as they develop.
Okay, and just one thing, Vincent, to that, and I appreciate your update on that. I want to remind yourself and myself that it is the province of New Brunswick who came to us that wanted that building to offer services to the homeless people and to make sure that they were bridged to home. And now we're having security issues within the neighborhood. We've had them going on for a long time. So this isn't about rebuilding a street. This isn't about bringing in a new long-term plan. We have to look at something immediately that is going to, help the homeless people get the services that they need, that they should be provided by the province of New Brunswick, Department of Health, Social Services, so on and so forth. So until this continues to go on, we're going to see requests like this come forward on a monthly basis. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thériault.
Merci, Conseiller Crossman. Conseiller Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire Adjointe. Points that Councillor Crossman just raised. I differ in the sense his question is bang on. When are we going to have a plan? But we have two plans already. One was the Mayor's Committee, Chamber of Commerce Committee on homelessness and crime, but there's very little on crime. The second one was all the initiatives that I don't know what was his name. Last year, I'm thinking of Mike Randall. There's two plans in place, and we still don't see any great, results. We hired 5 RCMP officers more. We hired 9 community officers more, and yet we still have to pay for security to specific businesses and enterprises. So this sucks. I would like, my first question is, can we estimate how much crime is costing us? Adding up the money that we've given to the RCMP for the 5 members, the 9 additional community officers, this kind of funding, if we go ahead with it, Peter McKee Center, to figure out for the taxpayers, to answer Councillor Crossman's question, what is it what is it costing us not to tackle appropriately or enough or whatever crime, which is the real problem, not homelessness. People walking on the street with carts and stuff does not create that much of a problem, but in my estimation. So could I ask staff to have a rough estimate of how much the crime is costing the city taxpayers? So whenever we get the budget time, do we add more? Do we subtract because it's not making much of a difference, etc.? We need that information. So that's my first question, or comment or request, if you wish. The second one is, I have no problem in bailing out, especially if the province has given up their part of it. Regrettably, that we are throwing good money out with the bad kind of expression, but I have a problem with the third paragraph. This is going to go eventually public, ratified public, and it already says in the first paragraph it's a one-time grant of $28,000. So I don't think the third paragraph, that any future increases in funding be considered in accordance with it, that goes without saying, and I don't know why we would include that. So if the mover and seconder agree to remove the third paragraph, which I think is a little bit redundant, and I don't want to rub it in during the public meeting, if they're willing to remove the third paragraph, I'm fine. If not, I'll make an amendment to remove it.
Merci, conseiller Bourgeois. Donc,
Thank you, Councillor Bourgeois. Yes, that's fine. Mover and seconder agree. So
a reply for Councillor Bourgeois?
No, does Councillor Crossman okay with taking
Yes,
it out?
Councillor Crosman,
Okay.
both Councillor
Okay.
Crosman, the mover and the seconder have agreed to remove that.
Okay, you both agreed to remove it. Okay,
Merci.
c'est bon, merci. Donc, le prochain, c'est...
so the next person is Councillor Légère.
No, it's just he spoke.
So, Conseiller Légère.
Merci beaucoup. M'entendez-vous?
Oui,
Oui, entendez.
Can you hear me? Yes, thank you.
Would this then be a pilot rather than a one-time funding? Is it not that the model would be tried to see how this could work?
So, Councillor, if I may, they have the Peter McKee has had security on site for some time now. I think probably a year.
Yeah.
So we, from administration, if I may say, our intent is not for this to be a pilot that we would continue this. This is just to sort of get them out of the hole that they're in, to make them whole, that's really the intent of this. I mean, how would you imagine this be? You know, if you're suggesting that we would expand this, I don't know how we would. Are you suggesting otherwise?
Well, no, are we going to then, will they have exactly the same type of security that they've had in the past, except that because it more or less amounts to 56,000, which is what they told us they had spent on security. Is that the understanding? And if it is, that's fine.
Yeah, so Councillor, if I may, what they're doing is they're essentially trying to replace reallocation of that money that's been earmarked to security to be able to provide those other services. That's really what, so essentially, you know, we're supplementing that part of it. We're not really paying for security. They're asking for this one-time increase because of their increased cost of security, really.
Right, exactly. So we're contributing to the needs of the shelter and not necessarily the needs of security, which they're going. There's a shift, but anyway, okay. I'd like to make a suggestion, because I think all of us are not necessarily on the same page regarding how services are being delivered right now, what John Howard is really doing in the drop-in center, what is actually happening, how many people are being really diverted and so on. Yes, we get glimpses in the report and so on, but for future, it would be nice to have maybe a real good background on, okay, what's actually happening in our community? What's happening on Monarch? what's currently happening at the Albert Street facility, and so on. And I think then if we were all on the same page and then we all have the same information, then it's helpful with respect to when things change. Some of us may not necessarily be aware, for example, that Ensemble have closed their area behind the Ensemble at the corner of Weldon or is it Weldon and Cameron? No, Weldon and Queen, and it's closed because they're doing repairs on the back of their building and they're replacing the deck. Well, that means that those individuals that were there are now probably all at the corner of High and Park, which has seen a huge number increase. So I think we all need to be maybe, brought up to date and not just a one-time thing. I think we really need to make an effort because I think that that's where we get a lot of misinformation. And, I think that it's happening elsewhere too. So I think it would be nice to know what's happening in the other areas and how these organizations, Harvest House and so on, are really helping and give us a real good up-to-date. And maybe we can tell a good news story instead of always indicating nothing's happening, we don't see anything. Well, the reality is there are things happening out there. We may not see it all, but there are. And I think that's really important. So just my thoughts on that. And anyway, I think that, the Peter McKee deserve a hand up, and certainly the people who need their services. So I'm in agreement. So thank you.
Merci, Conseiller Légère. You wish to elaborate?
Yes, Councillor Gaugier, I will pass those comments along to our CAO when he returns next week, just to get that information to council in the appropriate venue, to get an update on social issues.
Yeah, that would be great. And maybe we ask the organizations to be present at council maybe, and we ask them like what's happening, how's it going, and so on. And we get information, and that way it'll help because the media will be there, and it might help, put that message out. And that's, the sky may not necessarily be falling, although it appears that it is. I think we are making some inroads, and I think that maybe we need to share and celebrate those wins. We don't seem to be seeing many of them, but they're out there. Thank you.
Merci, Conseiller Légère. Conseiller Steves, and then Conseiller Richard.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have two questions. And the first one is, where did the 50% ask come from? They need 50,000, but did that come directly from Peter McKee, where they just thought, hey, let's just split this 50-50?
That's correct, Councillor. Yep.
And is that the right ask? Are we just going along with Peter McKee's breakdown when that breakdown could have been any other type of percentage?
It's a good question for sure. We went by the letter that they sent to us, and if council were to decide to do a different percentage, it certainly could.
Yep.
But just to note that the province did do half because they did request half from the province as well. But ultimately, it would be a decision of council.
Yeah, it just seems like a decision maker was making a decision that they didn't necessarily. They're playing the end game. They want the 50,000, but they don't really have the power to break down the percentage. And that just lent me to that question. So that's curious to me. The second question is, in our rental agreement with the province for the Bridge to Home, can we add some additional language? Would council consider some additional language as we turn the clock towards 2025? And that would be to save us from this type of thing in the future. And that would be a simple line of future associated and unintended costs are solely that of the province, of the renter of the building. So future associated and unintended costs. That's what category this falls into. And we're renting the building. And so what's that sound like to you, Vincent?
I think it's a great idea, and this is perfect timing because we're both working internally with legal, with Kezia to get the leasing agreement ready for you guys, but we're also negotiating with the province as well. So I think that's a wonderful recommendation, and we'll certainly broach that with the province and keep you guys apprised as that's developed.
Thank you.
Merci, conseiller Steves. Conseiller Richard.
So I'm just wondering, I mean, when I read this, I mean, I was pretty discouraged that we had to put in as as the discussions we've heard so far. It's a province thing, and we're putting money from our citizens in there. It doesn't feel right. So I just want to express that. So have we seen anything that says that amount that they've spent on security? Have we seen an invoice or anything like that?
We have not. We've just received a letter directly from their executive director. If that's something council would like to see, we can certainly request it. But there has been security on site. We've seen.
I mean, if anything, it would look low to me. I mean, if having someone stationed there, I think most of the day, 7 days a week, that amount actually seems like it's on the low side, probably. Yeah. But no, I haven't seen anything.
I mean, if I'm asked to pay something, I'm looking for an invoice on my house. So, I mean, I was just hoping that would have been looked at. Okay, merci.
Bonne question, Councillor Richard. Merci.
Good question, Councillor Richard. Good. Thank you. Councillor Kingston.
Yeah, and of course on the weekend, and it's a lateral conversation, but Albert Street businesses were quite upset. Again, it's the increased bed capacity at Nazareth, and they congregate, of course, on the vacant land, Tim Horton Lane. There were a number of calls made on the weekend, so that comes to us obviously as councillors. So it's concerning, and I agree with all the points today from Councillor Leger, Councillor Crossman, and everybody really that. Because of the deteriorating relationship between the Peter McKee and the seniors building, the former seniors building, we're now getting these requests for funding, and we want to be supportive and as helpful as we can. But again, we're reverting back. I guess my thought was, and to Vincent maybe, or Jeff, provincially, are they acknowledging? An acknowledgement would be nice to say, yeah, we're really sorry, guys, we dropped the ball on this. Sorry you have to fund extra security. We're coming to the table and we'll be willing partners. I don't mean to be disparaging or critical of our provincial government. We are good partners in a number of areas. Are you getting that message, gentlemen, that they're going to cooperate and come to the table?
I think, if I can, the provincial government's position would be that law enforcement and those things are our jurisdiction to look after through the RCMP and through bylaw. They would push it back. Social development would take the position that security is not in their bailiwick. That's not within their lane. So that's where the pushback would be.
Right.
And I mean, if we have the discussion with regards to the original SEPDED that we presented to council back in the spring, one of the items in there was having an allocation of funds to deal with situations like this. And it might be the discussion with the provinces. They should be putting up a portion of that fund to deal with situations that arise when you introduce a shelter into a community, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, granted, Jeff, for sure, SEPTEDs are great, but again, as we head into August, we're starting to see the numbers again. And thank you, Councillors here. I didn't know that Ensemble had closed that back area at Gordon and Weldon. So those are great things to know. We get calls. And we try to be as informed as we can on what's happening around our nonprofits, but it's becoming, again, it was a pretty wild weekend down on Albert Street, and La Factory and Chris Rock obviously being affected. Just to point that out and ask that question. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Merci.
Conseiller Kingston. Is there someone who hasn't spoken who would like to speak? No? Donc, Conseiller Leger et
Councillor Leger, and then Councillor Crossman. Thank you.
Coming back to what was just said, it mentions the $56,000 budget that they're using for security. It's the number that they presented to council late in the fall. And it says, again, so I look at that in terms of that is their true costs for security. So just, I mean, they haven't sent an invoice, but they're indicating that their contract costs, their contract on-site security personnel at an annual cost of $56,000 a year. So that does justify they must have the accounting then to go along with that. I wanted to indicate. Last week I asked for some clarification related to Albert Street, because I was getting the same calls that Councillor Kingston was getting. And according to what I'm told, the bed capacity at House of Nazareth is 64. And they've been running 88% and 95% since mid-June. I think they may have changed in terms of who is allowed in and so on. They may be dealing with higher acuity. But that is really what has changed there. But then on the other hand, there are 2 hours a day or something, they're being told that they have to leave because House of Nazareth is closed, and there's really a disconnect. So I think that those are the things that would be nice for all of us to understand, maybe to Vincent and to Jeff, so that we really have a true picture on this. And, you know, we sort of get information piecemeal, and you know, I don't know what to, what to say other than, the Albert Street, though, is interesting because the people seem to be collecting on the lane that I believe is owned by the city of Moncton between the Chris Rock and the former Tim Hortons. So that might be something we have to consider in the mix. But in any event, if that's not the case, then it would be nice for clarification as well.
So one of the things, just for clarity, Park and High, the majority of people that you see there, with the exception of maybe one or two, are not clients of Harvest House. Albert Street, they're telling me there's 0 clients of House of Nazareth on Albert Street. These are people that have found a shady spot. There's 6 big blue spruce there. And that property is actually owned. That piece is owned by Lafford. And we own the street only, and there's no setback. But they're congregating underneath those trees because it's a shady spot. And you can get out, it's kind of quiet and out of the way, and that's why they're congregating there. But what's interesting, a lot of the issues that are happening are transient individuals that are actually not clients of the shelters in these locations.
And see, that needs to be understood, right? So that, because right now they're bearing the brunt of this from everyone that's really upset, and it's not fair, but nobody has counter information. We don't have the real clear picture to be able to say, no, those clients over there are not, they don't go to Harvest House. Well, where they come from? So then the narrative changes, and for us, it'll be more helpful. And the same thing for Park and High. I mean, if they're the same ones just kicking around, and then what are we doing about it? Then we have to talk about, well, what does this look like, right? If we have 100 people who are not going into shelters and they're clients of no one, well, then doesn't that defeat the purpose that we want to bring people into a shelter? We want to try to give them some help and move it along, right?
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, thanks. I appreciate the clarification.
Merci, Conseiller Jean-Vincent, please.
Just to further that, Councillor, we did have an encouraging phone call with Joanne earlier today. One of the things that they are looking at is recognizing that the potentially going to need more shelter beds. And I'll be the first to say, so will the province and so will the nonprofits. We don't want more shelters. However, we can't build fast enough, so it's a necessary evil. That being said, what they are recognizing finally is the need to have space for people to shut a door. So I'm sure Council recalls the Bloomberg Harvard project initiative that we had here, where they did a deep dive into pallets. I spoke to a colleague in Halifax this morning. They have 19 pallets set up. They're ordering another 126 before the end of the year that will be up and running. The ability for someone who's homeless to be able to shut a door behind them, even if it's 2 people in there, they're able to share a space that's not going to be, with all the hectic and chaos that goes in congregate living of shelter. So the province is finally starting to look at that, whether it's going to be a pallet community or maybe building a new building or repurposing a building and having the space where they can shut a door. This is finally the best practice that we've been advocating for. And again, this is just preliminary conversations with Joanne. I don't know where the funding's at with them or how far this will go, but at least they're starting to talk the talk, because this is really going to be the solution. When we see folks congregating outside and when they're told they have no place to go, largely they have no place to go. If they're able to, go to a place and shut a door, they'll want to go there. So this is encouraging. Stay tuned as that develops.
Just as a follow-up, Vincent, I'm told that in St. John, they've ordered a dozen, I believe, pallet shelters.
Already, yeah. There you have it.
and they're on their way. So that may be something to look into. Perhaps that's the province's pilot.
Yep.
But I do know that they are on their way.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
May I ask what is a pallet?
Yeah. So it started in the U.S. These are shelters that sort of pop up. They're like 100 square feet, 80 square feet. They can be shipped 25 to a flatbed truck can get here within a couple of weeks. They pop up in a matter of hour each one, so you can do a whole community like within with a good team, well within a day. And there are self-contained units that have opening and closing doors. It's definitely a good solution. It's not a silver bullet. It won't work for everybody. And if we were to do it, there will be setbacks. I'm sure there will be people where it will not work. But for the vast majority of folks, this will be a life send, and it will help to reduce the calls for service at all levels of government, in my opinion.
Merci Vincent. Conseiller Richard, est-ce que vous avez des questions?
Councillor Richard, did you have a question? I think we see your hand. Yes, I do. Councillor Léger.
They budgeted for 56,000 and now they're asking for half. I didn't see that written anywhere. Did I miss that? Jeff?
So yeah, the total amount is
budgeted
56,000 in total. And the province
sorry, go ahead.
Yep, the total amount for the cost of security is 56,000 per year. The province came forward with the 28, half of it, and they're requesting 28 from us.
I understand that part, but Councillor Léger says that it's a budgeted piece. Is that in the letter? Is that in the information?
It's in the letter that they were sent.
Budgeted?
It says that it's to avoid this, the Peter McKee Center has had no choice but to contract on-site security personnel at an annual cost of $56,000. If you want to ask them if they are continuing, so I'm thinking that it's an ongoing item for them.
Okay,
so the reason they're asking 56 is the province giving them half. I know that they should probably pay more.
I'll keep reading from where you stop. This expense was never envisioned in the annual budget and therefore has been taken from our food purchase account. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Merci, Conseiller Richard. Merci, Conseiller Richard. Conseiller Crossman.
Deputy Mayor Theriault, I'll make 2 points here very quickly. One, Vincent, you were talking about this pallet shelter community. Would this be the same link that I shared with council and senior staff back in March with regards to Halifax?
I would imagine so. Halifax just did it as a pilot, and they're expanding exponentially. I don't recall what your link might have been, but more than likely, if it's pallet, if it's shelter, if it's homelessness, we're on the same page with the same thing. Yep.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. And my question is for Jacques Doucette. If he's online, I'm not sure if he's there. I see his name is written. In the CRF, the last page of the CRF, under financial, it says that the contingency has $626,000 and $8.67 left. Jacques, the numbers that I saw at the end of last week would indicate that there's more money in the contingency than that amount. Which is the correct amount?
Thank you, Your Worship, to Councillor Crossman. The amount, hold on a sec. I just want to pull that document. It'll take me 2 seconds, but that was the amount that I had sent to City Council. So I'd be surprised it would not be the same one, but
I'm just curious, Jacques, because I think the amount that I have from you on this last time shows an amount of 811,000 remaining.
So if you pull the document, the email that I sent on Tuesday, on July 16th at 5:23 p.m. That was the summary of what was in there after last week's public council meeting.
Okay, so the amount on Thursday, then the remaining contingency of 811, that needs to be adjusted. Is that what you're saying? Your email dated Thursday, July the 18th?
Did I send an email July after that?
July 18th, yes. I just want to make sure, Jacques, that if we're looking at possibly, taking the money that we're accounting for.
Jacques, yeah, if I could just,
Yes.
Jacques, it's probably the amount is the same as what you sent Jacques last week, the 626. And then probably what needs to happen is just withdrawal of the 28 from the 626, leaving a balance of 598 is what I would foresee based on the email correspondence that Jacques sent. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm looking at one dated July the 17th to council leadership team from Jacques with regards to responding to Councilor Richard. And the contingency request motion was $1 million. And then there was
sorry, Councilor Crossman. No, I can clarify that. So that was actually the motion that was made in 2023 in 2022 for the 2023 budget. In 2022 for the 2023 budget.
Right.
He just wanted clarification on if there were restrictions at the time on the council contingency at what it can be spent on. It had not; those numbers were just the preliminary ones that were set 2 budget cycles ago. Last year we added another $1 million, and in my summary that I sent on the 16th, the first row on line 2, you see the 2023 allotment starts at that $801,000.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Merci, Councilor Crossman. Is there anyone else? I can't see the hands. We're fine. Donc, great discussion. Merci à tous. I really, if I may, before we go to the motion, I really appreciate Conseiller Desjardins every comment, but Conseiller Desjardins in particular coming before council with this issue. The RCMP is it once a month or whatever? Our social issues are extremely, extremely challenging, and the public needs to feel that we have some control over this. So I don't know how we do this, but we just had a strategic planning session of council, and my understanding was we discussed this, and this is a high priority for council. So looking forward to having some continuing our positive dialogue, not just amongst ourselves, but with the community as well, the public. Donc, on the motion, est-ce que je dois lire avec l'amendement? Non.
Do I need to read it with the amendment? Okay.
And nay? Motion carried unanimously. Merci à tous. Merci, Vincent.
Thank you.
The next item is video surveillance policy amendments, and we have Claude Desprez, I believe, he's coming down.
He's in.
Oh, he's here?
Yeah, that's right here.
And I believe that Colin Littlejohn is on there. So.
Bonjour, bien, merci. Donc, Claude, c'est à vous.
Okay, merci.
So the floor is yours now.
Deputy Mayor. So back in April 17, 2023, Council, as you recall, had adopted a video surveillance policy. And after having it in place for a bit and upon reflection, there was a few things that the administration felt were missing that should be included to sort of tighten up the policy a little bit and give some leeway, I guess, as far as when we're looking into these things. So 4.1 FII that was in your package, what we're proposing is assisting in investigating and resolving possible violation of city policies, directive, and practices. And if you look at the one just above that I, we're talking about kind of the same thing, but we're looking at federal provincial law, and we added municipal bylaw. So in hindsight, we're making reference to our bylaw. We should have made reference to the policies and directives and practices that we have in place, or maybe coming down the road, which we don't know exactly what it would look like, but at least it would be covered. And also 4.1P, the reason that's being added, with the exception of records overlooking errors handling cash, as these will be routine erased every 90 days for auditing purposes. It's just the 30 days is not quite long enough so that if by the time they've done their audit, they want to go back and look, the record could have been erased. I think it's happened once in the past. So finance, particular revenue, and this is only where cash is being handled. Will only be erased the footage every 90 days versus every 30 days. So those are the two changes we're looking at making to the policy. And we're obviously open to questions if there's any from council. Thank you.
Merci. Any questions?
Conseiller Bourgeois, conseiller Léger.
Conseiller Bourgeois. Conseiller Bourgeois.
Oui, excusez. Merci beaucoup.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor and Claude. I have a question on the wording. So on the policy itself, it's actually on the second proposed amendment. It was for, what was it? 4P. Okay, right. So my first question on this topic, why are we saying that other records would routinely be erased every 30 days? Shouldn't a policy be a bit more specific than that? Shouldn't it say something like video surveillance records shall be erased every 30 days? If it's not the case, I think there should be explanation. So why do they add the word routinely? Well, I, as a department, added that because, yes, it is routinely erased, but occasionally the system might not do it specifically every 30 days. So, yes, it should be erased every 30 days, but in some cases it could be a little bit more than 30 days because of the system. So that is why the wording was set that way. It's not something that happens very frequently, but it's just to be safe in case that scenario were to arise. Okay, I have another question then. Why not have 90 days for every recording? Well, this is something that we had discussed quite frequently, in fact. We looked at policies and best practices throughout the country. Some places only keep recordings for 10 days or 14 days. We've discussed with the RCMP and they thought that 30 days would be sufficient. We also have to think about storage space. The longer we keep this footage, well, the more expensive it costs because it uses up a lot of room. So the administration decided that 30 days was a good middle ground, and 90 days, well, that's for only 4 or 5 of the cameras where there is cash handling. Okay, thank you very much, Claude. I would like to change the resolution a little bit if it's not already done. Madam Deputy Mayor, I do have another question, though. I don't know, though, if you want to give the floor to someone else and come back to me. Alors, pour la motion.
Conseil Léger, merci. So, on va continuer, we'll continue the discussion.
Okay, we'll continue.
Conseiller Léger, je pense que voilà. C'est la main qui est là.
Bourgeois voulait continuer.
Ah, conseiller Bourgeois, excuse-moi là.
Juste à la fin.
Oh, I apologize, Councillor Bourgeois. It's not with regard to the resolution. It's with regard to the topic. So I was waiting for later. Okay, Councillor Léger then, and Councillor Richard, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Bourgeois. Thank you so much.
Councillor Bourgeois has, but I'll ask it in terms of how are the cameras on St. George Street functioning, and has this policy been used? And some of the cameras at one point were, at least one of them was vandalized and removed. So if it isn't for today, that's fine, but it would be nice to get an update on where we are with that and what's our next steps with that type of surveillance.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have that answer, but what we can do is I'll make a note of that and talk to Ryan, and they can maybe provide an update of how the cameras are going on St. George and what's kind of their plan, especially the one being vandalized. I think they do have a second thought of how they could maybe do that, make it more difficult. So we'll make sure that Council gets an update on that.
Thank you.
Merci. Conseiller Bourgeois.
But
Thank you. Councillor Bourgeois now? Oh, actually, Councillor Leger just asked the question that I wanted to ask. Okay. So on the motion,
So all in favor, signify by raising your hands, like they're saying aye, and nay. Motion carried unanimously. Merci.
The final item is revised sidewalk snow removal plan, Alexandre Duhet and Don Morehouse. Believe they're both online. There's the presentation. Alexandre or Don?
I'll go ahead, Shelley. Thank you very much. We're going to talk about the exciting topic of winter on a nice sunny day right now. So we have a few sections there to cover. It's regarding the sidewalk snow removal plan. We'll go over the background, the current program criteria, some of the proposed changes, and what we see could be the next steps. Next slide. So just a few notes here. The active transportation plan that was approved in principle by council in 2022 has some elements in relation to winter sidewalk snow maintenance. And as we know, a lot of residents, it's becoming more and more important to them to be able to use these services and these paths in the winter, either for walking or some are even biking later into the winter and maybe some earlier in the spring. We also had 2 snow committees in 2011 and 2015, which provided critical guidance to help the City of Moncton develop the annual sidewalk snow removal plans. Out of this, we were using what came out of these committees to prioritize which portion of sidewalk should be serviced in the winter. And when we came to council last fall with the revision of the sidewalk snow removal plan, council requested that we revise or look again at how the criteria are established, if they're still relevant today, if they should be tweaked a little bit or give priority to other aspects of that we have in the city. And some questions that we may remember were around transit for the bus stops, the density of some areas of the city, school zones, and things like that. Now, just a couple of notes before we move to the next slide. We know that we can expect the annual average snowfalls to somewhat decline due to climate change, but it does bring some other challenges, okay, and some can be around ice control. I think we've seen it in the past few winters, not only for Moncton, but also for places like in Halifax. I was reading about Montreal last winter, how they really struggled a lot about controlling the ice, more so than just the sheer amount of snow that may fall on the municipality. So even though we may have, on average, less total snow, it still requires some maintenance during the winter to ensure the surfaces can be used by our residents. Also, it's important to, just a sec there before we move to, thank you. The condition of a sidewalk impacts greatly the productivity of the activity. So when we have our municipal tractors, the machines that travel on these sidewalks, if the sidewalk is really rough and the blocks are uneven, they cannot go as fast because there is very little suspension in these machines and the operator will get bounced too much and it's not sustainable over a whole shift. The other part of this too is the quality of the surface on which the users will walk or do their activities. If it's uneven, there may be more ice in the night that will form instead of the water draining toward the street or into the grass, as well as if it's too bouncy, the operator might have to raise a little bit the blade so they don't hit a hard block and then get like projected into the windshield. So the condition of the sidewalk does affect the productivity of this activity, but also the resulting quality of the walking surface. So we can go to the next slide. So Up to now, we've been using a priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3 criteria to guide how we build the plan with the resources that council provides public works. So priority 1 would be like, you know, the arterials, some on one side of the collectors, things like that. Priority 2 is you know, smaller roads, bus routes, and 3 would be some other ones. Now, we know that we had some grandfathered portions, and I have it in the coming slide that I think we only had about, based on our estimate, about 5 kilometers of grandfathered pieces that did not meet these criteria, but were awarded over the years for various reasons. And we also had a deficit of about 30 kilometers that would have met these criteria, but just could not be serviced yet because the resources were not there. So we can go to the next slide. So this is a little busy, but if you take it line by line, so what I just talked about, the grandfathered from previous program, it's 5. So really, we are doing 5 kilometers that don't match the old criteria. So right now, our recommendation is just to move on. We know how difficult it is to remove portions that are currently serviced. We experienced it last summer where we had to make some of these tweaks of removal to allow for some more addition of other sections. So we would recommend we leave this. Also, the second line where we talk about current program gaps. So that's as per the old criteria, there were still about, and again, it's in our estimate, about 30 kilometers that could have met the previous criteria, but we just don't have the capacity to service. We would just move on, not add them right now, and start looking, if council agrees, to new criteria. In our review of what is currently serviced and where we currently have transit bus stops, we think there's very few sections. I think there were 2 or 3 little sections that were not serviced. We estimate that to about 1 kilometer. So we were proposing for council to allow us to add this in the upcoming revision of the plan, which will be brought to council maybe in August or September. Then comes the topic of schools. And here we're looking primarily to K-8. We've excluded the high school. I think that's the message we heard before. So there's 3 lines there, and you'll see it on an upcoming map, and we'll make it a little bit clearer. So we looked at, for somebody walking from a school, there's a buffer of 0.5 kilometer walking distance. That has a deficit of 4 to 6 kilometers throughout all the school. It is not currently serviced that falls within the 0.5 kilometer walking distance. The line after this is 0.521. So it's not inclusive of the 4 to 6, it's additional. Okay, so that's another 60 kilometers that's not serviced. And if we wanted to look at the remaining 1 to 2 kilometer, like, you know, for that walking distance buffer, it's another 57. So let's say we wanted to service all of the K-8, you know, that what's not serviced right now, just to complete these walking buffers up to 2 kilometer, we would have to add 46 plus 60, it's 106 plus 57, or whatever that total would be. So we'll show that on an upcoming map. That's the focus of one slide. The BIA is that business section, like it's a bit bigger than the downtown, as you member of council will be familiar. So we have a deficit of 9 kilometers that are not currently serviced in the BI zone. Currently, administration was not recommending to go forward and add this now, but maybe for council to consider in the future if they wish to add more resources toward that. We also looked at the hospitals. Okay, so walking distance from the hospital, we used the 0.5 kilometer criteria. We could use a 1 kilometer or some other criteria now. Sometimes it gets a bit complicated because it may overlap with a school or some other things, but we identified about 6 kilometers not currently serviced in the winter within a 0.5 kilometer of each hospital. We also tried to look at the population density, but that was not easy. So we thought maybe a 6 kilometer, but again, there could be some overlap. So that's approximately what we've identified here. Like if we take the total about 185 kilometer on service, just to remind council, it's growing every year. So I don't know what the latest numbers are, but I think it's around 488 to 491 kilometers of sidewalk in Moncton right now. And of this, 305 kilometers are serviced in the winter. So I put a little disclaimer right at the bottom here. For any time that we add resources, what is not in the column there, annual resources cost, is the first purchase of the equipment. Because the first time we buy the machine, we need this, but after every year we charge a piece for fleet reserve. So it will be sustainable in the future. But when we start with a new resource, we need to purchase a piece of equipment, which is a little bit less than $200,000 that we've identified here. Also, when we match our resources, so if we added an operator in the winter for public works, we need typically to have this person work elsewhere in the summer. In some cases, we're able to put this resource toward another activity in the summer where we may have budget or we may not, just a consideration. And we'll talk about that, I think, in one of the upcoming slides. So we could go to the next slide. I think the French slide next. And then if you go to the one after, this is a map. Pretty well done. Our GIS team put that together. So if you take the time to look at this, so we've identified the K-8 school, so that'll be elementary and middle school, if I'm not mistaken. We've asked for GIS to put down. So this is the big black dots. Then we show from darker to lighter, the walking buffer. So the darker color shows a 0.5 kilometer walking distance around that school. And the middle color there would be the 1 kilometer, and then the light color would be the 2 kilometer. So what becomes obvious here is very quickly, almost the whole city gets service just by trying to service the schools to the walking distance. Now, I understand that the French district is a different criteria for busing than the Anglophone. Here, we've just, for simplicity, just went to 2 kilometers, and you know, we could tweak it, but it gets complicated every time we had a different parameter and vary this. But it just gives the idea of the effort that we would require to cover 8.5 kilometer versus 1 versus 2, just to give an idea. Now, if you also look in there in red, blue, and green, those are the currently serviced pieces, sections of sidewalk, and the black is not serviced. So here, what you'll see in an upcoming slide is where we look at within a 0.5 kilometer walking distance of a school, an elementary school, what is not serviced is the black, and how can we start to add resources toward this if council so desires. We can go to the next slide. So this is busy, but basically we've looked at each of these schools. We've looked at how many kilometers or meters, 1,000 a meter would do a kilometer, how much sidewalk they currently have service, what's their total amount of sidewalk per school zone there, per that 0.5 kilometer buffer, and see if there's any, I don't know, it would be right to call that iniquity. So how can we assign more kilometers to schools? Because obviously, if we're looking to assign up to 100 something kilometers, it would be quite onerous, although council could decide to attempt to do that in one shot, because it would require several machines, several staff. It would be quite an undertaking. So here we know this year, council has given us one additional machine with an operator in the winter to add 15 to 20 kilometers. We have not assigned this yet, and we'll come to council in August or September with a proposal. What we wanted to see is if council would agree for us to attempt to go this way here. So when you look, let's say, at Saint Bernadette, toward the middle of the table, you see that this zone, this 0.5 kilometer zone, is 66% unserviced in the winter, if you wish. So we would assign it a little bit more kilometers, so a 4.2 kilometer. If you look at another school, in contrast, maybe some don't have as many kilometers, but take, let's say, North Rob Fry, it is only unserviced at 14%. So we thought maybe we don't go give them more kilometers just yet. If we only have 15 to 20 kilometers to assign, maybe we could attempt to assign it this way. Now, it won't be an exact science. This is just easy on the paper. But once our teams start to look at this, they may have to give, 0.1, 0.2 more or less in different places. But the idea will just be to guide us toward how can we assign 15. And if council did agree with this, then they could, and if they agreed for the 2025 budget cycle to assign more resources for public works to do more sidewalk, we could come back and reassign this extra capacity in a similar fashion as we drive this 0.5 kilometer buffer to completely service across all the schools. And if council wanted to keep going, then we could look at the next section, next tranche, that would be a 0.5 to 1 kilometer. Maybe next slide. I think we have a French version of that slide. And then after this, we'll do it. Okay, so here, if I skip the first point there because it's a new item there, but if I go to the second point, we would suggest that council look at covering all transit stops except industrial parks right now. I think we don't have many sidewalks in industrial parks anyway, but we don't think it's a big gap. We think it's 1 kilometer right now. Then that we look at moving toward clearing in the winter all sidewalks that are within 0.5 kilometer walking distance from the K-8 schools, utilizing the proposed methodology that I explained on a previous slide. And that council allow us or ask us to propose a 5-year plan. Like, what could it look like in the next 5 years? If council does not wish to add any more capacity, it's okay, but just go back a little bit. Okay, thank you. And then if council doesn't want to add capacity, it's okay. It'd just be helpful for our teams to know. Or if council would like to tentatively add, let's call it 15 to 20 kilometers per year, then we'll work with this assumption, and it may be helpful to know that. Now, just before I move to the next slide, which talks about what could look like a 5-year plan, the first point there, I wanted to just put out there that we believe that based on comparable municipalities, other municipalities, also feedback from councilors and residents, that our current P3 allowing us 5 days to complete a section of sidewalk in the winter doesn't seem very realistic. What we've seen mostly is other municipalities go like maybe within 24 hours, within 48, or even faster than that, everything done within 1 day. I'm not suggesting we go that aggressively at this point, but we think it'd be probably a good idea to try to bring that 5 days toward the 72 hours, or even eventually merge the P3 within P1, P2, all within 48. So something for council to think about right now in a tentative draft plan that is not for council. We're not asking council to approve today. We were putting numbers that could allow us within the next few years, I think it's 2 to 3 years, to reach a staff to equipment ratio closer to 1.5. So the way that Public Works previously staffed their machine, so let's say you have one loader or one sidewalk machine, they would put one staff. So that worked okay in the past. I think what happened over the years, not only for Moncton, City of Moncton, but other businesses or industries, they haven't been able to get people working as much overtime. So we've noticed that in the past few years, and that's why we had come to council asking to convert some of our parks casual staff into permanent and allow us to add more people in the winter, which helped us. We now currently have a ratio of 1.3 operator per sidewalk snow clearing unit, which is better than the one we had previously. So we think if we could move a little bit again and bring that to like a 1.5 to 1, we would be able to change our P3 to 72 hours. So we think we're close to be able to do it. We think it'd be a reasonable approach. And if council thinks a good idea, then the plan that we're showing next allows to get toward this. So we could change the slide now. So this is a potential 5-year growth plan, what it could look like. So you'll see on one of the first line, we're making an assumption here. How many more kilometers are being added in the city every year? We've used 5 kilometers. It could be a little bit less, a little bit more, but there's a lot of growth right now. So it does make a difference every year compared to maybe a city that would not be in a growing mode right now. So we currently have 17 units active, and we have 2 spares. Currently have 22 staff assigned to this activity. So we currently service 325, which is the last machine we got, using the 20 kilometer of scope per machine. And you'll see the kilometer per unit. So I've put the target a little bit lower over the years, but we're not doing this right now. We're still around the 20. Staff per unit, this line shows we're at 1.3, and you'll see where it goes toward 1.5 we seem to overshoot there, probably added one too many person toward the end. We could fix all this. Then spare to active, we're currently, I think it's tight at times. Some of these machines haven't been as available as we'd like. We don't have good data yet to validate this, but we think it'd be prudent to add some more spare capacity in the fleet, especially if we grow it. And the kilometer service, you see right now we're servicing 66 person. And the reason why I referred to the active transportation plan, if you remember, I believe the plan called for 75% to be serviced in 27. So with the resources I currently have as a just potential draft would bring us to 72% in 27. And I think there was a further target in 32 for 85% maybe or something like that. And we're just giving idea of costs here. So it's a little bit below $200,000 per year for annual cost increase. But we need to add, if we had a machine, we have to buy this machine. So I'm showing it at the bottom. Now, the little note I have toward the bottom here is that we currently have identified an opportunity in parks where they have funding right now to contract out some trails maintenance and tree planting. And they would be able, we believe, without additional budget required in their department, to take on, we call that a 6 and 6. So if we had 2 operators in winter for public works, they would move to parks in the summer, and park would use that internal staff toward planting their trees in a house, which they believe would be a very good initiative. They tried it last year with students, but it was too difficult to manage, so they reverted this year, I believe. But they would be able to do that in house with these 2 individuals, and also they could use the 2 individuals to help with doing some trail maintenance in the various parks that they have. So that right now is an opportunity for 25. So that helps us. We don't have to budget more in the summer. Year to year might be different. Another question that somebody may have would say, should we look at contracting out this activity, right? If it does grow, is it realistic to do it all in the house continuously? And there might be options in the future. We have been exploring different options. Right now, we don't have it identified, but we're evaluating various ways to introduce contracted services for sidewalk snow removal. It is not a service that is common in the mountain areas for a contractor, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to contract out as opposed to maybe Quebec City with probably 50% or just about plus minus 10% of their snow removal work, including sidewalk, with contractors. So the market is quite familiar with this. Halifax has Dexter, they do zones for them. So we've been looking at different options. If it's something in the future that council wants to consider as part of a growth strategy, we'll be continually looking at our options and maybe doing a pilot very soon to see how it could look like. So, next slide. I believe I had a French version of this, and after this. So as next step right now, we will bring, maybe in August or September, for council's consideration, a revised sidewalk snow removal plan. So what we would like to hear from council today is if they agree with our proposed criteria, where we look at the various schools and assign to first where there is less service in their zone. So that'd be helpful for us to guide us in our the build of the next plan. And then for the 2025 budget deliberations, if we would like to bring for council consideration for various requests depending on where they would like us to go. But right now we were thinking about a spare unit and 2 operators. Now saying this, that would not bring us more capacity next year. We could bring 2 units, 1 spare, 1 active. We could keep the number of spares as they are now and take our chances and maybe see how the reliability goes, things like that. There's different ways we can do it. It all depends on how much additional resources and money council would like to add, if any, as was indicated in the CRF. There's a lot of different competing pressures. We do understand that this may not be right now what council wants to increase the service on, but knowing this will be helpful, and we can bring a plan to achieve any number of scenarios for council to consider and help us better see what's coming in the future for our teams, maybe for the next 5 years. Would be great. So I'd be happy to take any questions. I have Dawn here today, I think online as well. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Alexandre. Je dois dire que vous avez eu.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you so much. You were able to create a masterpiece through this presentation on snow removal. I adore the maps. I love them.
and a seconder for the motion. Je peux pas voir. Conseiller Steve, Conseiller Steve, et Conseiller Léger. So, on the questions, I have Paul Richard and Conseiller Bourgeois. Councillor Steve. And Councillor Steves. Donc, Conseiller Richard.
Ouais, merci Alexandre, c'est tout un projet.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Alexandre. This is quite the project.
Sidewalks around schools. We've talked about getting the kids to school on a sidewalk and not in the street. I think this is bringing us closer to what we've been talking about. Alexandre?
Oh, yeah, that's good. I didn't know that there was a question. Yes, definitely. And it's been very challenging because there's so many considerations. And as we reviewed this, we're even spinning it a bunch of different ways, but we thought we need to bring something that we can anchor the discussion around. And we know we have limited resources and additional resources. So how do we assign them? We'd be more than happy to follow any other proposal council may have. And this has come to fruition after a lot of work over the past few months with different team players. We had involved with this from GIS. Leslie was involved with this. We talked in the public works team. It was not easy, and I hope council finds this useful. If not, then we'll certainly, we're open to any other ideas, but it's been challenging to see how we can assign scarce resources toward improving. And, we understood clearly that the schools were the focus, so we thought that could be helpful. And depending on how much council wants to add for resources in the future years, if any, we can continue to increase the level of service around these schools if that's what council would like to do.
I'm really happy to see the increase. As you know, we've talked about École District Francophone Sud. If you're not within a kilometer, you have to walk. Or if you're within a kilometer, sorry, you have to walk. And I believe Anglophone East, it's similar. So can we go to the slide where it says proposed methodology to add capacity around schools? Can we have that? Give you a page number, but I don't see one. Yes, there it is. Oh, bunch of numbers there. Yeah. So Alexandre, the numbers. Let's start at the top there. Arnold H. McLeod, the 1710, the 1250, the 218. Are we talking? What are those numbers?
So let's say if we go back to the map, we'll go back one slide there. So I'm not sure which school is this one, but if you take any one dot, okay, so you pick that school, and the dark color there, see the dark buffer, if you go to the next slide now, the table, okay, so the dark color is kind of the total. You see the column total? So that would be how much sidewalk is within the 0.5 kilometer buffer, right? So certain schools have more than others. If you take Beaverbrook, Bessborough, they're showing a 12 kilometer. The Arnold school that you referred to is 4 kilometers. So this is how much sidewalks is within the 0.5 kilometer only. We're only looking at that little dark buffer here for each school. Okay, does that make sense?
Makes much more sense. Yeah. So like that first number is not 1710, it's 1.7, right?
Well, that's the 1.7. Those are in meters. Sorry, I guess I see now. I haven't said it anywhere. Sorry about that. It was obvious to us, but now we could improve this. So the P1 is 1.7 kilometers within that school buffer. That the 0.5 kilometer is service as a P1. Now, if you take P1 plus P2 plus P3, but you see we have 4 kilometers. So there's 882 meters that are not service in the winter for that school zone of 0.5 kilometer buffer.
Okay, that makes way more sense. Thank you for that clarification. No worries. I really do appreciate this. The kids have to get to school and not through a street if they're walking. So, merci beaucoup.
Merci, Conseiller Richard, Conseiller Bourgeois, and then Conseiller Steve.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la maire adjointe. Merci énormément, Alexandre et ton équipe, Don.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Alexandre, and the whole team. This is probably the fourth review of the sidewalk snow removal that I've been suffering through since I was elected for the first time in 2008. I think it's important to remind council that snow removal of sidewalks, especially in the area around the elementary schools, is a question of public safety. It's never happened, but there's never been major accidents, but there could have been because some 5, 6, and 7-year-olds have to walk in the street because the sidewalks are not cleared in some cases, and that's just dangerous, and I think we can do better. Second, there's the question of equitability. Equity, everybody pays taxes. Everybody pays the same taxes, the same property tax to the city. Everybody, in theory, should have their sidewalks cleared at the same level. But as we say, it's a question of money. So I'd like to remind those who might not have been on council, who weren't here around the table back in 2012. I think Councillor Thériault will remember. She might be the only one. Perhaps Councillor Crossman as well. I don't remember if who was here before 2012. But in 2012, we had done a public survey. We called it a service was perceived as being a priority by citizens, but the level of satisfaction at the time was the lowest with sidewalk snow removal. So citizens expect that this service be offered and offered well, and I'm happy with the formula, but I do have a couple of questions. Alexandre, I'll ask them in English for my colleagues, but I just want to make sure that I stated my principles before I ask my questions. I'm going to go back to the slide deck. Now, when you come back to council, if we go ahead with this, and I agree that we go ahead with this this idea and that we perfect it a little, that we work on it, but I agree with it. What would it cost council to clear, I'm going to say all sidewalks, well, all sidewalks except in industrial parks, the ones that we can leave as is, but also all of the sidewalks at least one side of the street, perhaps not 100% of all sidewalks everywhere, but I'm trying to see what the options might be. Even instead of being $200,000, it would cost us $400,000 per year or $600,000 per year. I think council must at least consider this.
Or at least all streets, one sidewalk per street, either the east side or the north side. Could we have that whenever we get to see the final product, final plan?
Yeah, you will see, Councillor, thank you. In one of the slides, if you look at the number, the slide for the estimated gap per category, I think it's maybe 5. My rough estimate, and finance has to make sure the numbers are very accurate, but my rough estimate as an engineer, I've used $6,000 per kilometer. So let's say, I mean, we have over 100 kilometers we need, but if you took 100 kilometers, what would that be? $600,000. So I think that we can come back to council. Now, we were walking away from that one side versus two sides because we can slice and dice this thing and make it even more complicated, but we were trying to stick with the radiuses. But anyway, to complete the whole network, or like you suggest, we could remove some very specific areas like industrial and things, which I think would not be material really, but we could, and we could give an idea to council, and this would be very helpful for us to understand at budget deliberation, what would council like to see put in the budget for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, to help us build a plan for council to consider, and maybe approve in principle, understanding that each budget cycle would be approved by itself, but we would know there's more machines coming, so much more. Do we need staff? Do we need contract out? So that'd be very helpful. But yeah, we can certainly bring back a bit of an estimate like this for council if that's something that's desired. Yeah.
Okay, you said, I'll come back to your initial question. You said in the estimated gap per category slide, there was an amount of 600,000. I don't see that.
Well, no,
I see a 1.1 million.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. In the first, in the title, like in the first line of that chart, I've said $6,000 per kilometer. That's the rough number I've used. That's our cost, right? If I took our sidewalk budget currently and the number of kilometers we service, so a very rough estimate tells me it's about $6,000 per kilometer.
Oh, 6,000. Okay, I understood 600,000.
Yeah,
so that.
Well, I said 600. If we wanted to add 100, we would be at 600, and we know there's more than 100 kilometers of gap, right? So you'd be probably in the million something.
Okay. So if we have the last line, it says total for additions. These are the additions that you suggest, 185 kilometers for $1.1 million a year. But that still would not be all of the streets. There are still some gaps, right?
Yeah, these are just some of the items that we felt were important. Also to note, as I had mentioned on the little asterisk at the very bottom, we need to buy equipment separately, first purchase, which is not in that number. And also there's a summer cost, which I didn't put there because if we grew internally, let's say, we might say, okay, asphalt is becoming less competitive. We could build ourselves an asphalt crew, or maybe council wants to put more effort toward concrete beyond our current budget. So there would be other costs potentially in the summer to add as well, right?
Right. Okay. So anyways, as a counselor, what I would also like is an option that would, whenever you come to council for the final decision and final estimates and all the calculations, that one of the options would be, 90% or whatever the percentage comes to, that would be sort of the ideal. Some kilometers of sidewalks would not be done. They're in industrial parks. Some others might be, a tiny little street where in the old days, both sidewalks were done, but no longer the case. I'm trying to think of the name of the street. I think it's McAllister or something like that. That's downtown. And this is a tiny little street. I don't even think that some of the streets have sidewalks at all there anyways, but it would be nice to have a ballpark picture of what it would be if we wanted to be the ideal, right? Perfection. Okay. To your slide K, the map with all the colors and everything else. I just want to make a point, I guess, but it's a question. Salisbury Road does not have any schools. So what are we supposed to expect from the city in terms of that one major sidewalk? Will it still be plowed from tip to tip?
So in my proposal that I had there's no removal of anything that is currently served. This is what I was talking about, was for anything in the future that council may want to add. We could look at this protocol, but it does not propose, like if you look at one of the previous slide there, well, the one we talked about just previously, we say do not remove what's grandfathered. We do not add what was previously made. We don't change anything. Right now is what we have. Unless council wants us to go remove sidewalks currently being serviced, it was not in our proposal right now to consider this.
Okay, all right, perfect. Okay, now I'll go to the CRF. I thought I had one question on the CRF. Yeah, okay, sorry, I'll be repeating myself. I'd like to have the ideal as an option.
Okay.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Merci, Conseiller Bourgeois. Conseiller Steves.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Alexandre. This is a solid step forward to you and your team putting this together. This is also another good news story, to take the words from Councillor Legier from our earlier item. So hopefully the communications team is kind of pre-setting or setting a date in the future where that can go out to say that all the schools are going to be equally treated there with the snow removal. So that's just one point I wanted to make there. My question, Alexandre, is regarding the transit stops that you referenced. And I'll just use specifically Twin Oaks as an example, but I'm sure that is replicated throughout the city. People are standing on the curb just off of the road. Sometimes it is on other people's property, on their grass. Sometimes it's just on public land. When you talk about transit stops being cleared, will that get people off of the icy roads? And will there be a square or some sort of portion for people to stand so they're not on the snowbanks sliding onto the icy roads? It's one thing to stand on a curb in the summertime when a car is coming along. There's a slight bit of confidence to that, but there's almost no confidence when you're standing on a snowbank with an icy road.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I can see where there might be a bit of confusion. So this is for existing sidewalks that are in place. So if there is currently no sidewalk beside a transit stop, this proposal here does not contemplate adding, and I've seen them added over the past year or two, and I think I know what you're saying, a bit of concrete pad next to the transit stop. This may be a takeaway there, Lauren, that could be made. I don't know that Elaine was joined. I cannot see, you guys are so small there. I don't think Elaine is with us today, but Elaine could take that away and review with Angela or whatever they need to do to come back to council, what their plans are to add any more of those pads, concrete pads. And these are typically, once they're installed, they're maintained by Kodiak Transpo. The Public Works does not touch the buses and things like that for snow removal.
Okay, that's good clarity. When I heard transit stops, I was thinking one thing, which I've communicated here now, and you were thinking something else. So it is a side branch to this conversation, but if we could table that so that there's a little bit of clarity to council as to the transit stops that are not on sidewalks. That would be really great to hear what that plan is. And even if there's no cement slab would be ideal. Clearing the cement slab would be fantastic. But in the interim, can a portion of the grass be cleared for people to stand on? I'm sure we all have examples in our wards that it's very scary for people in the wintertime. So no need to discuss that any further, Alexandre. Again, that's a side branch. Sorry for bringing that up, but I just,
no problem at all. Thank you.
You prompted that. And so who will table that? Who's going to let that go to another meeting?
Councillor Steves, I'll ensure that that one is followed up on as well through the CAO's office and included that. And Alexandre will have that as part of his presentation when he brings it back.
Thank you.
Merci, Councillor Steves. We have a motion on the floor, so could all in favor please show hands or yay? Opposed? Motion carried. Donc, that's it. Merci à tous.
Thank you very much to all of you.
We need to adjourn. Forgot about that. Merci, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Salut.